Let's bow in prayer for a moment. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our salvation. May you speak to us, either through me or in spite of me, but that your word may fall in our hearts like seed, and that it might grow to huge and wonderful trees of life, that you'll be glorified. Amen. Faithfully fearing fear. We live in a time of fear. This morning when I came to church, everybody on the subway was wearing their masks, and everywhere people wear masks, and it is as if not only here but worldwide the virus got us in its grip. Fear the virus. But that's not all that we fear. There are so many other fears that we have. One of my favorite writers is the American king of horror, suspense, and fantasy novel, Stephen King. And the one emotion that this writer builds all his works on is fear. He exploits fear and he navigates fear. And he has learned the art of fear and he knows how to apply it. And this little picture here, I thought is very funny. It's of the little Stephen King reading his first essay to the class, and just see the reaction of everybody running in horror of what he had in mind. So sometimes when I'm ready for it and in the mood for it, I watch a Stephen King movie or some works of Stephen King. It is suspense all the time. It's horror. And he knows how to get you to the edge of your seat. The first month of 2020 has passed. And if we look back at the news headings for the first month, it reads like a Stephen King horror story. Fires, political turmoil, many things that just went wrong. And if that is not enough, cities are in lockdown with the virus, and we're still in the middle of the coronavirus. We don't know what's going on exactly and where it's going to lead. But people fear. Unprecedented and terrifying fear that grips so many people around the world. And it seems as if most are in the walls of this city of fear. When we look at Joshua 6, it's the story of three fears. The one is the story of the people in that city, in Jericho, that feared what is going on outside. They very much like the cities that are in lockdown now. The Bible says that the gates were locked and they were in that city. There was no way of coming in or going out. Imagine the people of Jericho seeing a whole crowd of thousands of people encircling their city every day with ram's horns. They could only hear the ram's horns, and they could see these people marching around their city. They have heard about the God of these people. They had no idea what's going to happen. There were no intelligence, with nothing to tell them that these people are not their enemy. They knew they were their enemy. Think of the fear of the people encircling the Israelites. They only had the word of Joshua. They could only see the Ark of the Covenant in front of them. And next to them, beside them, there are these huge walls, massive walls. And they just knew. Joshua said, well, when I say shout, you shout. And what then? Joshua said to them, you will just go right in where there's an opening, but at this point, there were no openings. And then there's the fear of Joshua. Joshua himself had feared. He was just a person like you and me. Imagine if God tells you to lead thousands of people around a city. There was no way of getting into that city. The only way was to shout. When God commanded them through Joshua to shout. They might have been very embarrassed with themselves if nothing happened. So they only had a word. And it was Joshua's word. And Joshua heard from God. But he had the final say. He had, I can imagine the fear of Joshua, who was in charge of this whole operation. Can you imagine him? Fear. That's why God commanded him. In Joshua 1 verse 9, God commanded him, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. It was not a suggestion. It was not a matter of choice. God said to him, I command you to not be afraid. And here he is. It's right in the middle of this crisis. The people inside the wall, the people outside the wall, and Joshua, the commander of these people. Fear. In this story, the miracle is not so much that the walls came tumbling down. The miracle of the story is the walls of fear of these people that came tumbling down. What happened in this story is that the fear factor turned into a faith factor that turns in its turn to a God factor. Fear factor, faith factor, God factor. When fear turns into faith, and faith is projected on God, that this is not their problem, it's not their miracle, it does not depend on them, it depends on the Word of God. It's God's thing. What is fear? Let's just look at fear. What is fear? We all fear. We all are prone to fear. It's built in our bodies. If you look at this picture, it's a beautiful picture of where fear is situated in your brain. We all have a amygdala, and that's that part in our brain that is sort of our alarm. So through our senses, we get all the information from the outside, and it goes to this little part, a very small part of our brain. And when that part is activated, this is the warning part. It says run. It says freeze. It says fight. It's a very ancient part. It's a very primitive part of our brain. So we all are prone to fear, and it's a good thing. If we didn't have that, we would be fearless, and we would get ourselves into trouble, and even into very deep trouble. But this little part warns us. The problem about this little alarm that we have is that it's not logical. It's not prone to logic. When it detects fear or a danger, it just goes off and it goes wild. So we all have fear. It's a good thing. But when fear have us, when fear take charge of us, that's a different thing. Then there's no control. And so all of us have our Jerichos. It's not the normal things that we fear, like a busy road, just not to walk in a busy road or to do some strange things. But this fear is a Jericho in our lives, a challenge in our lives that we fear, that we don't know how are we going to get over that. We all fear. What kinds of things do people fear? Karl Albrecht says we've got all at least 5 basic fears. He says we all have the fear of extinction, the fear of ceasing to exist, the fear of death. That's why we don't just walk on the edge of a high building. We know we can fall. You don't do that. That's why we don't put our hand in the fire. We know it's going to burn. That's why we have this natural fear. But on the one hand, it's also the fear that I will cease to exist. And we all have that kind of fear. He says we have the fear of mutilation. And mutilation is not just to be mutilated physically, but also the fear of losing someone. We will protect our families. We'll protect the ones that we love because we have that inborn fear of losing them. We don't want to lose them. There's the fear of loss of autonomy, that we're not in control anymore. We want to be in control of our lives. We want to be in control of a situation. And once that control is taken away from us, we fear. We have fear of separation. Fear of separation, we don't want to be left out. And that fear is from our very, very small baby times, baby years. We don't want to be left alone. We fear separation, abandonment, rejection, connectedness, to become a non-person. We all fear that. We all fear of being not wanted. That's why for children it's maybe worse. The playing ground where there's bullying and that kind of thing going on. The fear of not being in the group. That's why teenagers sometimes do strange things. Just to be part of a group. Just to be in and not be out. There's the fear of the ego death. Humiliation, shame. There's also the fear of being left or of being missing out. FOMO, they call it. Fear of missing out. We fear that that's what advertising is all about. Advertising preys on that. Well, if you don't use our product, you will be left out. You'll miss out on our product and to be very happy. That's why advertising is so powerful. It plays on our fears. And now we can ask the question, how do we manage fear? What do we do with our fears so that our fears don't possess us? And that's where this story, this beautiful story of Joshua comes in. Think again. There they were, fearful. How to face your fears. And there's a few things that I quickly want to share with you. The first, name your fears. Face it and name it. Many of us have fears that are phantoms. It's sort of in the dark. It's sort of shadowing us. These people had to walk around the walls. They had to circle the walls. They were very much aware of the impossibility of those walls. It's big, it's huge, it's impossible. Most of us run away from our fears. We have our Jericho and we run away from it, or we bury it, or we We do something with it. Many people drink their fears away, and then they realize the next morning their fears, the thing that they fear the most, is a champion swimmer. It comes back. You cannot drink it away. You cannot work it away. Fear, the thing that you fear, is there. So name it. Identify it. Secondly, declare war on your fear. These people knew we have to get in somehow. If I run away from my fear, I will be like the Israelites the first time when they went back into the wilderness. If I want to get to the other side, if I want to get to what God has promised us, if I want to get to the point of victory, of growth, transcendence, you have to get through your fears. These people had to get past Jericho. What is your Jericho? Declare war on it. The third, stop feeding your fears. Feed your faith and not your fears. We are good at feeding our fears, aren't we? You just have to open Facebook and see all the things there that people post there. My goodness, it's enough to drive you crazy. And then we have Twitter, and then we have YouTube. And if we just take the coronavirus, all the rumors that's going around and all the panic that's going around, we feed our fears. We talk about our fears. And as we talk about our fears, we don't talk about faith, but we feed our fears and we thrive on that. These people, the way that Joshua organized them was very interesting. They had to walk next to the wall, encircle the wall, but they had to walk with their eyes on the ark. Right in front, you got the sound of the trumpets, the sound of the ram's horns, the shofars. And then behind them was the Levites with the ark, and the ark was the symbol of God's presence in their midst. And then behind that were the people. And they were to walk 7 days. For 6 days, walk around the walls without saying a word. The seventh day, 6 times without saying a word. And the seventh time, Joshua said to them, shout. And as they were walking, they could only see. They were aware of the walls. The walls were there all the time. But they had to fix their eyes on the ark. Where are your eyes fixed on? Maybe your eyes are fixated on the walls. It's good to face the walls. It's good to know the walls are there and to know how big they are and to give it a name. But once you've done that, face the ark. Fix your eyes on God. Fix your eyes on God's reputation, not your own. Not anybody else. But fix your eyes, your mind on God's reputation. Fix your ears to hear the sounds of the shofars. Only then, and then alone, you can turn the fear factor into a faith factor, into a God factor. Just look at this cat. This little cat is running, is walking. Just look at the way that he's walking there as the boss, faced by so many dangers. And then you can say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of fear, of virus, of Jericho, of whatever it is, I will fear no evil. Faithfully fearing fear. Amen.
Please